a study to do a painting. I'm using Daniel Smith gouache as well as some others. So this is Daniel Smith red. And I'm going to show you every color I use. Yellow ochre by Holbein. I get all my stuff at Art Supply Warehouse, by the way. A little mister that I got on Amazon. All my paints are from Art Supply Warehouse, and they have a website, and they have really good prices. Daniel Smith Lavender Gouache. This is one of my absolute favorites, and I use it in everything religiously now. Winsor Newton Cobalt. Sometimes I use ultramarine, sometimes I use cobalt, but I switch off. This is a dark green from Holbein that I use very sparingly, not very often. And you can see on there I've also put a dioxazine purple on the bottom left hand corner. Oh, I'm using ultramarine as well. When I actually paint, I'll probably only dip into like 6 out of these. I also always have ivory black gouache on there. I don't use it that often, but just enough to get my darkest dark in there so that I know what I'm doing. I have this beautiful turquoise color also by Holbein. And then I'm showing you my reference photo, which you can see in the upper left-hand corner along with my little study. The study is how I'm going to get my colors from that photo. So this is the colors that I actually saw, and the photo is just a reference for the drawing part because the colors themselves have to come from life, for me anyways. All right, let's get started. I'm again using a cellulose sponge. This is actually on a sta-wet palette, and I can close it and put it in the freezer. Since it's a my at-home palette, I can leave it in the freezer if I'm not using it for the week. Mostly I use my to-go palette, but every now and then I want a bigger surface to work on. And I do put the gouache directly onto this sponge, which I purchased on Amazon. It's called a cellulose sponge. And I do that so that it stays wet, because even though there's like a seal, or even though I freeze it, sometimes it won't stay that wet. And I also do that because it allows me to dip into colors that I've already used just to tint my stuff or turn it closer to gray, depending on what I need. So now I'm putting in my sky. And in California, a lot of the times the sky is, for me, just white and that Daniel Smith lavender gouache. This color is literally the fastest I use any other color besides titanium white is this lavender color. It's in everything in California, and it really, really looks good as a reflected light, as a super juicy ocean color. It's just a fantastic color. So this is one of my favorites, and I use it a lot now. I'm mixing it here with the cobalt blue so I can differentiate the color line at the horizon. I'm also going to grab a little of purple, but you'll notice that one thing I like to do is I have a really big brush, so I don't always load the entire brush with the same colors. Sometimes you'll see I'll dip the edge of my brush into a color, so that way I have some differentiation and variation. Right now, I'm just deciding where the stone is going to go. I already put in some bright whites so that I understand what the seafoam is going to look like when I'm done. One of the interesting things is if you put in your bright white or your darkest dark first, or both, you can really tell what you're going to work with in the center, and it'll be a lot easier to figure out the values, which is how light or dark that your painting is going to be. You're going to be able to figure that out better if you have a reference point for that. That, and I needed a placement of the rock that wasn't too boring, because technically it's just a rock. I want it to look interesting, so I got that nice little seafoam going on over there. And you'll see as I am getting closer to me, I'm pulling in more of that lavender and other colors and saturating the ocean. With the ocean and other types of water bodies, a lot of times as it goes out and extends far, far out, it will turn into closer to a sky color. So I am working my way down from the sky color into what's closest to me, which is eventually some turquoise greens, because this is a very beautiful, beautiful area, and a lot of the yellows of the rocks reflect and come up from the bottom, so it turns this beautiful turquoise green when the sky is blue. And you can see me progressively getting darker. And with the flat brush, it works very well because each layer is a plane. So each layer is like farther back or closer to me. And I can easily say that just by moving my brush side to side instead of up and down. And with like the sky, I would go up and down. But for these kind of things, it actually just makes it visually easier for the person to understand that there are multiple planes or multiple layers of depth from where you're sitting. So it's not just one big block of ocean. I'm changing, constantly changing a little bit here, changing a little there. You'll notice me getting a little detailed here. This is because I'm looking at that wave. In the reference, which is the study, the wave has a lot of like turquoises in it, and there was some water bouncing up from the back in my study as well. And that was something I wanted to show. Waves have several different parts. They've got the top that reflects the sky. They've got the interior, which usually looks like the interior of your water, so it's a little darker. For example, it might be a turquoise teal. And there's a sea foam as well as the shadow caused by the sea foam. So you'll see like these darker dots towards the close edge of the sea foam. That's where there's like a cast shadow from the sea foam, right? But beyond that is also a little bit of reflection of that sea foam. So you'll see me changing these colors into slightly lighter, slightly darker, and that's me deciding where I'm going to place those darks and lights of that sea foam. It is a huge challenge. Waves are not easy to paint, and I do not recommend putting any waves into anything until you have gone out for a little while. Although, if that's what you love, just do it because you will eventually get better. One thing that you need to know is there's like no way to do painting over and over and over and like not improve. So, painting, whether the improvement is in just your brush skills, kind of like handwriting. If you don't write very often, your handwriting's probably whatever, right? But if you write all the time and maybe you're practicing cursive, like a year later you suddenly go, wow, my handwriting looks like calligraphy. This might sound very specific because this is a true story. I do a lot of writing and I collect fountain pens. So you see now I'm putting in those greens. Those greens are currently from the reflection of the little cliffside that you see. So I wanted to put those greens in to really start to show where that rock is going to be reflecting, how those waves are going to be working together, etc. And I'm putting the shadow side of my rock as well because they're kind of related. But basically, I started working with fountain pens and I had the world's worst handwriting ever. And so every day I would write like 3 or 4 or 5 pages just for fun. It could be anything. I am not a serious writer, and you'll see that I actually have an Instagram for my hobbies, which has my fountain pens and stuff. It's called The Unserious Writer because I don't write seriously. Also, my dolls and stuff are on there. So my hobby Instagram is because I didn't write seriously. I didn't take it too seriously. I didn't paint seriously. I just did it for fun. And in a year later, suddenly my handwriting was really nice. My cursive is really nice now. And people compliment my calligraphy all the time. And it's not calligraphy. I just write in cursive now because I have enough practice. It's much faster for me than regular writing. But I didn't start really fast. So when I'm painting this cliff, I have only done portraits until about a year ago. I'm an expert portrait painter, but portraits are nothing like the outdoors. They're just nothing like it. All the lessons I learned in color and design, none of them made any sense to me, and I just didn't get it at all. So, in fact, I will have a little video where I'll show you some of my early attempts at outdoor painting. But the fact was that I kept doing it because even though I sucked really bad at outdoor painting, I was like, you know what? Eventually, something has to give where I feel confident enough that I want to take this to the next level, right? So eventually, I just kept doing it and doing it. My old sketchbooks are filled with junk, but it does make you better. And the next thing you know, it's been a year and you're getting into these like juried art shows and you're like, I can't believe it. This is me. I'm a professional landscape painter. I can't. This is ridiculous. I was a portrait painter a year ago, and now I can also do landscapes professionally. The same kind of thing happened with portraits. Still life. So still life, I do professionally now a lot, but I only did portraits, exclusively portraits, when I started painting. So it was a learning curve. One of the things I talked about in our last video where we were in Dana Point, this is where I got this reference photo from. You actually might have seen this in the video. This rock that was here, is that as I'm going away from the sun, I'm kind of making things a little bit shadowier, not completely shadow side. I still want to keep those bright and light, but I want to show that it's going away from the top of the light, and that in this case, you can see the rock changes from this bright yellow down to this kind of like wet ochre-y color. So there's a lot of change there, and I want to be like a gradient. With gouache, it's pretty easy to gradate as long as you have your paints on that palette. So see how I dig into those old colors? I might even grab like some of the purple from the ocean and start putting it in there when I need to show atmosphere instead of mixing an entirely new color. Because I have that wet palette that's loaded with paint, I'll just grab some of the sky color I used earlier. So this is one of the main reasons that I continuously use this wet palette. I want to be able to dip in there over and over and over again. If I'm not using it for a long period of time, I can keep it in the freezer to prevent it from molding. And I want those colors to like be there. So they'll help me mix all the grays and stuff that I need. And if I need that to be bluer, I can make it bluer. If I need it to be more gold, I'll make it more gold. So you can decide that, but the good thing about having the palette there is that you can make minor changes that really come out looking nice. So as we were gradating down, I did my bright, vibrant yellow at the top for the lightest part, and then I gradated down just by grabbing some colors that are already on the palette that look like they would make the right decision for me. Color mixing is not easy per se, but I started my career in digital illustration using an oikaki board, along with, you might know because Lois Van Barl, she's one of my friends. We were all on the same oikaki board. So basically, we used to have this mixer, R, G, and B. And that was it red, yellow, and blue? Might have been red, yellow, and blue. But basically, you would only be able to make your colors from red, yellow, and blue. Those are your primary colors, right? So how much red you add, how much blue you add, how much yellow you add. It's a very simple program. Very, very, very simple. There's no color wheel. You don't get to just like pick a dropper, etc. You have to literally just go, okay, I need this much blue, this much yellow, this much red. And the cool thing is, it really teaches you how to mix colors. So when I transitioned from digital illustration in my early 20s, I switched to doing oil painting, and I did mostly portraits, which was what I did also digitally. It was not a hard transition because I actually just kind of mixed colors. But it still took me a year to be very comfortable with mixing colors. So once again, what I can't emphasize enough is that none of the tools or things that you learn, whether it's what brush to use or what kind of background to use or what kind of reference to use, is going to exchange the experience. But remember, when you're feeling like, oh, but I don't want to because I can't get the results that I want mine to look like a masterpiece, just grab a sketchbook then, because nobody's going to look at your sketchbook. But also remember, you're not doing this for other people. You're painting because the act of putting paint on a paper is so satisfying. For me, there's no feeling like the feeling of my brush glopping the gloopy glop onto the paper. Like, it's beautiful. That's why I gave myself that Instagram about being not a serious writer, because I just enjoy the feeling of the pen on the paper. I don't write anything. Sometimes I just doodle. Or I'll just write nonsense. Like maybe I'll just start thinking of as many words as I can that start with the letter A. I didn't write because I wanted to be the best. I wrote because the feeling of the pen gliding across the paper is like nothing else. And that's also how I feel about paint. Painting is something that like my hand craves. It's something my body wants me to do. It's a very, very, very satisfying, like almost like ASMR for my hand. So when you're painting, don't get hard on yourself. Don't pressure yourself. You don't need everything to be a masterpiece. You can actually just do a ton of crap in your sketchbook, and then one day it'll be good enough to switch out of your sketchbook. Okay, no problem. I gotta say, my Etchr sketchbooks, I sometimes rip out the pages. I cut them out carefully, but I do rip them out. I got no problem with that. Because, hey, sometimes it comes out hella good, and they have the best paper. So you'll see this. Actually, this setup is literally no different than my Etchr slate setup. It's just on my desk. I have a beautiful antique desk from the Qing Dynasty that I got from a beautiful, wonderful furniture store that was closing the location that they had over here. So you can kind of see the red lacquer underneath my towels, but I keep it very well protected because it's a beautiful desk. It's my most treasured. I love this thing. By the way, shout out to CSWO and Sons. I know they have 14 other locations, and if you are fortunate enough to have one near you, they have the best customer service ever. So congrats to them for being awesome furniture. Very, very, very bougie furniture. But you may or may not know this. I have a gallery. I have an art school, which was my first extremely successful business. I also own some crystal shops. So we have quite a little bit going on, and I love to talk about business and marketing. So that's something I'll get into later, especially with marketing art. I know it's a lot more challenging. For especially for us artists, because we usually find it boring, but I happen to love numbers. So what I can do is I will also start talking about that, and how you can market your own art. The only thing it takes is time and kind of like an attention span that you may or may not want to use on that. But it's okay because once your art, once you've painted outdoors for a year in your sketchbook and not shown to anybody because you don't care because it's for you, remember you're having fun doing this. Then one day you'll be able to show it, and people will start inquiring to you. Like one of these paintings is sold already. It was supposed to go to the Dana Point. I'm going to be at the Lantern District Art Festival in June. It was supposed to go there, but it didn't quite make it there. And I can talk a lot about how that happens as well. Okay, so you can see I'm still stuck on my big brush. I don't mess around with no small brush. Not until I have to. So I'm gonna keep going. I had to switch over here. Sometimes I take a break. I have a problem seeing my values until I take my tape off. So I'm going to go ahead and take the tape off before I do my finishing touches. So here we go. You don't have to use tape if you don't want to. Some people take up the entire page of their sketchbook. That's up to you. Okay, now you can really see that's much better. I'm going to take my super soft fluffy brush and I'm going to make seafoam. One thing is that not every brush can do seafoam. Not every brush is going to be like this. But I am using a little bit of yellow ochre in my seafoam because it was very vibrant and sunny, and the sun is very like a warm color. So you can see I'm going to variate my seafoam just a little bit. There was a lot of seafoam over there. I have some blues going back into the area where there's the wave, and then I'm using the brights on the other side. This is my only brush that can do the seafoam. This is actually an oil painting brush, but I don't use it very often because I don't want to take a bunch of stuff around with me. I do not want any excuse not to paint. So if I somehow come up with something like, oh, it's my bag's too heavy or something like this, I will fix that. And if I keep adding stuff on, I'll start taking stuff off. I'll say, you know what? I added this arm for my videos and it's too heavy. I'm taking it out. Because if it's making me dread picking up my bag, then I know that I'll use it as an excuse not to go out there and paint. Just go out there and paint or stay inside and use your nice desk or your not nice desk. It doesn't matter. If you have a desk, use it. Maybe you only have a counter in your kitchen, but the painting calls to you. It's up to you. You got to feel the longing. But what I mean is don't stop and don't give yourself excuses to stop because you will use them. I do. Now I'm switching to this one because I want to do a couple little dot details, and this is a stiffer brush. I'm going to tone down some of the wave behind the foam. So you can see me toning that down. That's where you can see kind of through the wave into the water below. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm also going to add a couple little extra dots of foam at the part I want the most foam. I am also love to mess around. I have no problem messing around. I'm putting in a little of that reflected foam light that I was talking about earlier. Throwing some nice waves there. I don't want anything too crazy. You will notice that I have no problem putting something down that's wrong and then going over it with what I think is right. My main emphasis with gouache is that, yes, it does dry darker or lighter. Just keep working because as you work, you will fix those areas that are too dark or too light, or at least you should. Don't ever, as Richard Schmid said, never knowingly leave anything wrong on your canvas, or in this case, your paper. And we're getting close to done. All set. I think that's it. And you can see this is our final project. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks for joining us.